Hello and welcome to another important conversation here on Real News Network. I'm your host, Aman Azhar. And the focus of this conversation is Amazon forest as a shared resource and how its mismanagement impacts all of us and why we should care. And to tell us a little bit more about what exactly the situation with Amazon rainforest is, we have with us Dr. Carlos Nobre. He's a climate scientist from Brazil and a senior researcher with the University of Sao Paulo's Institute for Advanced Studies, an expert on the Amazon and the impacts of global warming and deforestation on tropical forests. Really appreciate your taking time and talking with us, Dr. Nobre.
My pleasure.
Now, let me open this conversation by asking, why has the deforestation or the rate of it increased at a time when Brazil is struggling with the deaths from COVID-19? What is going on?
Well, basically, because most of the deforestation is illegal. For instance, studies show that last year, 2019, 90% or more, 95% of all deforestation and the fires were illegal. So they not abide by the Brazilian law or actually some other Amazonian countries as well, such as Bolivia. It's mostly illegal. And the fact is, the people doing this illegal deforestation, for instance, land grabbers, people doing illegal logging of timber. So they are not concerned with COVID-19 at all. I mean, they are out there in the forest continuing to do the environmental crime. So that's why we did not see any reduction on deforestation. And we are just starting the fire season, but the deforestation in the last 2 months has been much higher than 1 year ago. So because these people do not care at all about health. They are there to grab land, to steal timber.
Right, but this is also widely believed that the government of President Bolsonaro is actively dismantling the pro-climate institutions, and by defunding them also through issuing executive orders. Is that the kind of an encouragement, that political encouragement, that kind of fuels this trend as well?
For sure, the political discourse that the president has been issuing since he came into office in January 2019 has been a great encouragement for environmental criminals to go, because they felt, well, there will be no punishment. There will, because the law-abiding agencies, they are losing budgets. Some of their heads of divisions there for law-abiding, they were fired because they were acting properly. So the message that went to the field, to the Amazon crime, was, don't worry, we are never going to go to jail anymore, because we have a president which supports what we are doing, which supports opening up more areas, which supports invasion of indigenous territories for illegal mining, for illegal selective logging. So that was the key message that was conveyed by the president and by a lot of other people as well, some state governors, or the former president of Bolivia as well, Evo Morales, conveyed that message last year. So the criminals felt no risks for them, and that's the main reason why deforestation increased so much.
And Dr. Nobre, could you tell us, is there an active collusion between the political elites and these mafias who are actually into land grabbing and deforestation?
Uh, some investigations by federal police in Brazil reveal that a number of politicians from the Amazon, there are people there, sometimes state representatives, sometimes in cities, in small towns, they are councilmen, and always councilmen. We've never seen a woman, a female politician involved in this corruption scheme. So we see at the edge, we see down there, deep in the hinterlands, we see some corrupt politicians which are supporting which are benefiting. They are sometimes funding this land grabbing. We don't see those things reaching some other politicians in Brasilia, for instance. But certainly, I think if there is more investigations, serious investigations, we are going to see a corruption scheme that reaches all levels of politicians, because politicians in Brasilia who try to approve, for instance, not punishing illegal land grabbing. Now, currently in Brazil, there is a law there being voted by congressmen about forgiving all land grabbing up to 2018. So we do believe if there is a serious investigation in Brazil, it will show the connections between these high-level politicians in Brasilia and the organized crime, land grabbing, and the selective logging.
Right. So, would I be right in saying that this right-wing government of Jair Bolsonaro is using COVID-19 to push the agenda for illegal land grabbing and deforestation of the Amazon?
Not simple to see a direct connection. Uh, uh, Brazil's president is probably, along with a few other presidents in the planet, perhaps half a dozen, Venezuela president, Nicaragua president, Belarus, that do not believe the COVID-19 is very serious. He goes every day on TV, statements saying, people, go back to your economic activity. So Brazil is exploding. Perhaps it's the epicenter of COVID currently in the world. It's still increasing. It's really very serious. And of course, when the president goes and says that there is no risk, you can go back to your economic activities, that also conveys the message to the environmental criminals in the Amazon, because most of those people support the president. They voted for the president because they knew the president would come with this discourse of moving into the Amazon, deforesting the Amazon, exploring mineral resources illegally. So, of course, that message that COVID may not be that serious as the science is saying also supports these people going out for more illegalities.
Right. Well, could you make us understand what does the Amazon mean to this planet, and is there enough international political will to save it as a shared resource? You've been a member of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. What does your experience tell you?
I think that starting with the explosion of biomass, destruction of the Amazon, fires, deforestation last year, all of a sudden the world woke up, because before that deforestation was still increasing. Since 2014, deforestation was going up again, but only last year the perverse combination of the political speech of the president encouraging moving into the Amazon forest with the explosion of fires and deforestation, I think finally it captured world's attention. So people start very concerned about that, and including some repercussions, let's say investment funds start really paying attention. Are we putting money into the beef industry in the Amazon, driving more deforestation, driving more fires? So all of a sudden, the world, including the economic side of the world, start paying attention. And we have seen countries saying, well, we are not going to buy products coming from the Amazon anymore unless you make sure that you control deforestation, you abide by the law. So we are seeing that change. It's a global worry. The planet is worried. The population is worried. Even Brazilians, we are very worried. Why? Because the Amazon is very important for the climate stability. The Amazon holds a huge amount of carbon in the forest. If we lose the forest, all this carbon ends up in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, the most important greenhouse gas. If we lose all that carbon, probably it would become very difficult, not to say impossible, to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. And also, the Amazon holds the largest biodiversity on Earth. So if we lose the Amazon, we are running the risk of losing millions of species. And now COVID-19 also brought to, to our perception the importance of keeping ecological balance. So all these the new COVID, the SARS, all these epidemics and pandemics are generated by zoonosis, which is a lack of balance, ecological balance with microorganisms. The Amazon has the largest number of microorganisms in the planet. So if we disturb the Amazon, so the risk of pandemics will become almost something that will happen every month. So I think COVID plus increased deforestation and fires finally raise the concern about protecting the Amazon as a global concern, and I hope that will guide sustainable ways for the Amazon.
And do you think that kind of a feedback, that kind of a worry, is being channeled to the government of Jair Bolsonaro? Is there enough pressure being mounted on him to kind of understand? Because this might be a science, but this is also common sense, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's total common sense. 99, 98 to 97% of the planets, of the countries in the planet, they are abiding by science. In fact, I mean, polls, recent public opinion polls show a high level of trust in science, much higher than a few months ago. The anti-science movement was growing in the world until 2 months ago. Even scientists were not able to explain why in the 21st century we are seeing anti-science, climate deniers, anti-vaccine, even flat Earth people increasing in numbers in all countries, including countries of high science like North America, Europe. So now we are seeing the world population really put much more faith in science because of COVID. So that's also the case in Brazil. This is really, I mean, all the population is very concerned. This is not only happening within the core of the federal government in Brazil. So they are becoming isolated, they are losing popularity, they are really running, doing executive orders, like, a few days ago, Minister of Health encouraging people to take this drug, chloroquine, which many studies said does not have any effect. In fact, can be very dangerous to the health of many people. So we are seeing the president isolating himself, a small nucleus of people around him. Two ministers of health were fired in the last month. So we are really, he's losing appeal to the population. It's very anti-science opinions, and he's being very isolated. And we hope eventually he himself and his supporters around him, mostly military personnel, will change positions.
Well, I don't know if this is going to be any consolation, but the president of the United States has also been telling reporters and media on national TV that he's been taking that malaria drug to cure COVID or staying away from it. So this is apparently this right-wing agenda is also ravaging the world. That being said, could you also help us understand how important are the indigenous communities to the Amazon rainforest and its management? Because apparently they're also been affected by the COVID-19.
Absolutely, they are being affected because indigenous communities, most of the indigenous communities, they do not have like most Brazilians, like myself, descendant of Europeans who came to South America, and they do not have many of the immunity, natural immunity that we descendants of Europeans have acquired. They don't. That's why, in fact, historically, when the Portuguese came in 1500 to the Atlantic coast of South America, it is estimated uh, what is Brazilian territory today had something between 10 and 15 million of indigenous people. In 1940s, in Brazil, there was only 70,000. So from millions. And what was the main cause of death? It was not mass murder or slavery. It was really transmitting viruses, bacteria to the indigenous communities. So almost a genocide. So of course we are very concerned. The recommendations are for all these communities, indigenous communities, to isolate themselves. Most of them they went back to their villages, to their indigenous villages, but still we are seeing a large number of indigenous people dying. And if the COVID-19 spreads across all this in the Amazon basin, there may be something like 350 different indigenous groups. And if the COVID-19 spreads, it will be almost a genocide. So we have to be very concerned. And it's interesting because these people, humans, came to South America, to the Amazon, something like 11,000 years ago. And they always developed a cultural value, spiritual value, standing forest. Always. They could have also deforested, but and that was very smart because, given the number of microorganisms of the forest, if they did not have that vision of living in balance with the forest, certainly a virus or a bacteria would have exterminated them. So they lived for 11,000 years there. There is not known one pandemic across the indigenous communities. So they are in balance with those microorganisms, but not with the microorganisms that we bring to the indigenous people.
Right. And Dr. Nobre, I can't help but ask, you famously proposed that beyond a certain tipping point, Amazon would turn into savanna. Um, could you please expand on that? And also, sitting here today, and with all the data that you've seen, how close are we? And I hate to ask that. How close are we from that tipping point?
If we look at the Amazon, the forest, about 6 million square kilometers of forest. If you look at the north of the forest in Colombia, Venezuela, we have savannas, dry savannas, tropical savannas. If we look at the south, central Brazil, Bolivia, we have dry savannas. Tropical, but dry savannas. So the main distinction is that a dry savanna is a biome, a vegetation type, in equilibrium with a very long dry season, 6 months of rain, 6 months of no rain. And also in equilibrium with fire. Fire is part of the ecology of savannas. When you look at the tropical forest, it rains all year round, very short dry season, and no fires. Even when there is a lightning ignited fire, the forest is so wet, the fire does not propagate. So what we are seeing, and I've been doing research for many, many years, 30 years ago, I proposed this risk of savannization, is that we are seeing that the global warming plus deforestation plus increased vulnerability to fires, those three things together, acting together, synergistically, simultaneously, they are putting the Amazon very close to large portions of the forest becoming a dry savanna. In our estimates, it's something like 50, 60% of the Amazon. And southern Amazon, from Bolivia all the way to the Atlantic, we are seeing the forest almost at the edge of that savannization, the tipping point almost being crossed, because we are seeing the forest in those portions to become drier, tree mortality is increasing, the forest is losing its capacity to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, a tremendously important environmental service of forests. And so that's why we estimated that if we do not stop global warming and the deforestation, we are at the edge of this cliff. And in 15 to 30 years, the most of the Amazon, 50, 60% of the forest will start this irreversible way into a savanna. And it will take between 30 and 50 years, and then 56% of the Amazon forest will become a dry savanna.
And that would mean what for the global ecosystems, if you can briefly elaborate on that?
Very serious consequence for combating climate crisis. If that happens, we are going to lose between 200 and 300 billion tons of carbon dioxide, the most important greenhouse gas responsible for global warming. If that happens, probably it will be very difficult to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, as I mentioned. Also, we disturb the most diverse, biological diverse ecosystem, disturbing the ecological balance of millions of species of microorganisms. For instance, as being hundreds of species of coronavirus identified in the Amazon biome. Only this particular one type of virus, there are hundreds of thousands of other types of virus. So if we move, if that area becomes a savanna over a few decades, we disturb the ecological balance, and we have to be very prepared for one pandemic a month.
Right. Well, Dr. Nobre, Bolsonaro is a political reality nonetheless, and probably there are many more like him. Are there any solutions to reverse this trend, which can also be even acceptable to a right-wing government like his?
I hope uh, the current government will eventually realize the damage they are doing to Brazil, to the Amazon, and to the planet. And we hope President Bolsonaro has still 2.5 years to go into his term. I hope the government will finally realize they are doing a terrible mistake, in protecting Brazilians from COVID-19, a terrible mistake in advancing deforestation fires into the Amazon. This is my hope. If you ask me how likely is that to happen, I would say 10%. But still, I hope they will eventually realize the serious damage they are doing to Brazilians, to the people from the Amazon, and to the planet.
And Dr. Nobre, do you see any creative solutions being brought to bear on this situation that can help us reverse this tide of deforestation and so much of a dumping of carbon dioxide in the environment, independent of the situation?
Yes, we are, for instance, a very important solution for mitigating climate change is forest restoration all over the planet. If we, let's say, restore in all continents, something like the size of Australia, 7 million square kilometers, we are going to doing something very important to reduce the risks, because as forests are growing for many decades, tropical forests, 30 years, 40 years, high latitude forests, 100 years, you are removing carbon dioxide. As forests are growing, they remove carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. So this is a natural climate change mitigation. And that would also recompose ecological balance, keeping microorganisms, virus, bacteria, etc., contained. Also, we could really start seeing a new economic model for tropical forests. Globally speaking, biodiversity products coming from biodiversity, they have a very small percentage in global economy. However, the potential of biodiversity is tremendous. For instance, you could find new drugs for many health problems in the planet. You could find a lot of products coming from the forest, which are potentially with great economic value. Let's say one from the Amazon forest that every people know today, the acai berry. Acai berry brings $1.5 billion to the Amazonian economy today and keeps the forest standing. So the economic potential of forest standing, tropical forest standing, is gigantic. So the global economy has also to find ways to support this new economy we call a standing forest bioeconomy, and science and technology of 21st century can find the ways to really to harness that tremendously rich biological assets of the tropical forests.
And I guess my last question, and if you could briefly tell me, there was a global drop in emissions when the economy stopped literally moving during the COVID-19, which is continuing. Do you think that people around the world, the political elites and the economic elites, would have understood or get the message that probably this is something that they should continue to address in terms of moving towards green economy, what we choose to call?
That's the $1 trillion question. I mean, of course, this COVID-19 brought to light the fact that we cannot continue the pathway that we were on. We have to change economically as well. We are seeing European countries talking a lot about the Green Deal, the new Green Deal. Even in the US, some potential candidates for elections talk about the Green Deal for the US. We are seeing also that discussion happening in many other countries, less so in developing countries, but I think it's very important that developing countries also take this opportunity, seize this opportunity. Let's get out of the COVID-19 in a totally different pathway. A green path is possible, it's doable, makes sense economically as well. Renewable energies are cheaper than fossil fuel energies today. Protecting biodiversity also protects our health. So I hope that most countries and most of the people in this planet will support taking this sustainable path for the future. I hope the COVID-19 has been bringing this message very clear that we do not move back to the old economy.
Well, on this note of optimism, let me thank you, Dr. Carlos Nobre, for taking out time and sharing your insights about the Amazon forest and how it determines our future going forward. Also, thanks to all of you who tune in to watch this. You can look us up at therealnews.com. For myself and the rest of the team at The Real News Network, it's goodbye for now and be well.